Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the MX Endurance Podcast, where we talk about everything that's been happening in the world of endurance sports. My name is Tim Ford. For the first time in 2023, I am joined by none other than the penultimate legend, the sexy shepherdess, the sexiest voice in triathlon. I remember those nicknames. James Bale,
man.
Welcome back, mate. Happy New Year.
Mr. doesn't have the show notes in front of him. He's winging it. I was wondering how far you'd get with those. Mate, Happy New Year. We're back. We took some time off, didn't we? We fully got into the time off mode because I was feeling it. And I've forgotten how to do this podcast, if I'm honest. You're going to ask me what I like about MX Endurance in a minute. And, you know, my response to that is going to be, I don't know. Isn't everything changing? Aren't you meant to be telling people that everything's changing and shit like that? So then I can tell you whether I like it or not.
No, you are exactly right. We have taken a really big chunk of time off. Again, I think we plan to take, I think we're thinking about a month, and then maybe a week ago we're looking, it's like, oh, there's actually not that much to really talk about. I don't know if I need to do an episode. Whereas this week, I feel like the floodgates opened a little bit.
Yeah, stuff started happening, isn't it?
Oh, we could probably actually do a podcast. But again, the good thing is that because it's been over a month, there's plenty of stuff from like the end of last year. I mean, we didn't really recap last year, so we can do a little bit about that. But there's plenty to talk about, mate. But before that, James, how was your break, mate? What have you been up to?
Yeah, it was all right.
So enthusiastic, mate. Like I love that you're bringing that energy and excitement straight back to 2023.
That's because I'm trying to be positive, but it wasn't all right, to be honest, mate. I think it was the worst Christmas I've ever had. I just got sick. Everybody around me got sick. I spent most of Christmas Day in bed, most of Boxing Day in bed. I've never had that before. I've never had that sort of that feeling of illness where you just can't do anything but sort of fuck all. And that was my Christmas break. And then I'm just in the last 2 weeks started to get back into a bit of training again and a bit of structured being able to feel like my old self. So that's pretty much the story of my break. How was yours?
It's funny because I think I had a similar experience but without the sickness. I didn't get sick, but so last time on the MX Endurance Podcast, I was heading to Bahrain for the 70.3 event after being in Thailand for a few weeks, and I went and I did the race, and it was like it was a hard race, mate. Like people who think that's just a super fast course, yeah, I think it is if the conditions are right. But on this day, it was so fucking windy. Like, I mean, what the hell? I remember I got to
what was your bike split?
2 hours 14 something, like literally 40k an hour, almost bang on. But I think I was on track to ride a sub 2 hour bike split until I turned around and came back because it was like riding against the current. The wind was so ridiculous. And I mean, honestly, the only good thing is it wasn't gusty. So you're not having the thing trying to blow off your bike. It was just literally like riding through.
Had you got ahead of yourself in the tailwind portion and start? Did you believe that a sub 2 hour bike slip was in you, or were you in the back of your head thinking, I'm going to turn around and there's going to be a fucking headwind in a minute? Was it a surprise?
Oh, no.
And had you fucked yourself?
Okay, there's probably a little from column A, a little from column B, because I knew there was clear tailwind, because even like, you know, I thought I can ride a bike. And my numbers were good. In fact, my numbers were a little bit lower, but I was like, okay, the speed's higher than it should be here. But I'd been in Thailand, I'd ridden all that time. But it's not a straight out and back course. Like there's, you know, as you know, there's sections where you sort of, and every time you turn a slight direction, you notice it. And you're like, okay, yeah, this is around. And I guess in the back of my head, I was thinking maybe, just maybe the wind will turn, or maybe it'll die down a little bit. Like maybe I'll be lucky. No, it wasn't. I absolutely wasn't. It was hideous. And I got off the bike and hamstrings were like done, mate, like properly done. Could barely run. And so that again, I'm going a long way to get to my story, but I'll tell this anyway. Christian was there. Christian Blumenfeld was there. And I know you listen, Christian. I know you're listening to this. He was doing the relay. And as I'm coming in a transition, like waddling in because I can barely run, Christian's standing there, jumping on the spot, ready to go. And he sees me. He's like, I'm going to catch you. And I'm like, fuck off. Leave me alone, Christian Blumenfeld. Stop bullying me. And every time he passed me or got near me on the run, he barked at me like a dog. He did the junkyard dog of triathlon mockery. So
when you say every time, did he lap you? Did he lap you a couple of times?
Two times he lapped me.
2 times, nice.
Once obviously was just because he was probably a couple hundred meters behind me, and then he lapped me by like
Mo Farah did
5K.
that to me the year I did it. He lapped me twice. But not fun.
It was so funny though, because we honestly had this like bit of banter going, because I'd see him like, you know, because there's sections where you sort of run against each other. and I'd see him and I'd yell at him, and then he'd yell at me, and it was good fun. And the last time he passed me, he barked at me again. I was just like, fuck you, Christian, fuck off. Like, just giving it to him.
I mean, I say I turned triathlon off, but I did pay attention to your times on that race. I was watching you on the tracker. When I saw your run split go as it did, I knew that something had gone wrong on the run, because that wasn't a standard run time for you, certainly not in a place like Bahrain.
10, 15 minutes slower than it should be. But again, I had fun. Yeah. I think that experience, having the sort of like, not battle, but like, banter with Christian made it a lot of fun. But
yeah, calling it battle is giving the word battle a lot of heavy lifting.
Oh, dude, he passed me. The second time he passed me, he passed me, and it was honestly like he was doing 100 meters, and I was doing the 5,000 meters. The difference in our pace was fucking madness. And he had by his standards, he ran pretty slow. I think he ran 68. But no, it was cool. It was a good event. But anyway, the reason I was telling all that was because I got back to Australia. I was actually meant to be racing this weekend in Tauranga, where we'll talk about the race ranger thing. But I was sort of, getting back into training, and I was tired. I was like, I'm really tired after this. And I think it was Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve, so the 23rd of December, I was in Melbourne, and I went to go for my long run. Mate, could barely do it. I was like, I am gassed. Like, I have got nothing in the tank. It's been a big year, and I just made the decision I'm going to take my off season now. So contacted my coach Reese. I said, mate, I think I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks just completely off. And I did. And I wasn't working either. So I had literally 2.5 to 3 weeks of just not working, not training, sitting on the couch, getting fat, playing PlayStation.
Good work.
It was awesome.
Good work. I mean, it's my time off was forced rather than decided on, but I mean, it was quite nice having, once I got that sick, I decided to make the decision not to try and push anything over Christmas. So I did take, I think it was 2.5, 3 solid weeks off without really doing any exercise. Managed, when I got back to lifting the weights, to just about manage to lift the same weights I had been lifting before Christmas, but it hurt a lot more. And the running has begun now. So there's work to do, but it's coming back.
Yeah, I'm a gym bro as well. That's the one thing I did, is I went to the gym. So I'm swole, mate. I'm getting swole. That's the thing, isn't it? That's what they say at the gym.
I think so.
We should do the intro. This podcast is the official podcast of MX Endurance Tour's premier endurance sports community, created by 4-time world champion Chris McCormack. You alluded to the fact that I would ask you this question at the start of the episode, but I'm not going to, because you've already shut me down. You said you don't know what to say.
I've shut you right down. Well, the problem is, mate, you keep giving everybody the big old everything's going to change, the stuff happening, and then fuck all comes out of you. So go on.
It's because it's out of my control now, mate. It is now part of the corporate hierarchy, and they have marketing plans and communication plans and things that are beyond my my decision making power.
Communication plan, just a one pager, like, do not communicate.
Do not say anything until we're ready to say everything. But you are correct. Things are changing. I think, look, there genuinely is a whole bunch of things. It'll be interesting. We'll see what happens with everything, but I guess as soon as we can, we'll keep people up to date. But, mate, I thought a good place to start here this week, because we are trying to be a bit more loosey-goosey and not just be a podcast that reads articles from Tri 24/7, is let's talk a little bit about last year, because we obviously saw 2022 was, I think, one of the biggest, craziest years in endurance sports, and we haven't really had a chance to sort of retroactively look back at it. But what would you think about 2022 from a fan's point of view about the sport of triathlon?
Yeah, it was a unique year, wasn't it? Because it was like the first year we'd been actively back after COVID, where everything was starting to happen again. Not only were the standard events happening, but a lot of stuff was getting crammed in as well, sort of stuff that hadn't happened. And so you had all these multiple peaks throughout the year. And it takes me a moment sometimes to remember that the St. George World Championship that we both attended was in last year, if you know what I mean. My brain has kind of consigned that to that was the year before. But it's not. It was the start of last year. And then you had sub-7, sub-8. And then you had various other world championships. You had PTO events. You had the Collins Cup. You had 70.3 Worlds. You had Kona back again. It was with the men and women being split for the first time. It was, and then you had news like Nice coming along. So it was almost an assault on the senses last year. It was a drought for so long through COVID, where everybody was just trying to survive and keep going, and then suddenly you've got all this triathlon content coming at you. It's hard to keep up at points.
Well, I like what you sort of did because let's actually like just do a bit of a snapshot about I guess the big triathlon events or things that happened last year, because you're right, you had St. George Ironman World Championships, Kona Ironman World Championships, 70.3 World Championships, Commonwealth Games, Super League Triathlon, PTO Tour and the Collins Cup, World Triathlon Championship Series. Like, that's 7 pretty big things in triathlon.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say that we are not, we're starved of sporting entertainment, are we? I mean, that's looking, in terms of championship events, it's because you've got the sort of WTS, which is the season that runs through, and then you've got like the Ironman individual Ironman races, which is their season that runs through. So you've got these seasons taking place. But in terms of championship events, that's looking more like a cycling calendar than it is, a triathlon calendar. You've just got event after event and not a huge amount of time between them where people are just cracking on with their bread and butter day to day. So we saw people targeting different events, obviously, but I think we also saw a kind of a symptom of last year was some people not firing quite as we expected them to at certain places.
Also on that point, not just that they weren't firing, but I think a big thing we saw, and again, I'm not an expert here. I don't know if this is an actual reason, but I believe that the reason we saw such a high number of athletes out injured is probably because of the demands of last year. I think if you look at, there's probably two parts to it, because I think you're looking at a year packed with more prize money, more races, more prestige, more titles than we've really seen before. You've also got this post-COVID period where a lot of athletes have maybe dropped off, or they're not quite sure where they are, or they've seen something like in the women's race, Taylor Knibb and Ashley Gentle come out and absolutely start destroying that middle distance. You see Christian Blumenfeld and Gustav Iden doing their thing at fucking everything. And I think that, plus the fact that there were so many races, we saw a lot of athletes maybe start to push the envelope just a little bit too far, because there's so many of the bigger names, not only that maybe were injured, but like some of the things, you can't get past not seeing Jan Frodeno do either of the Ironman World Championships last year because of his injury, and then doing Roth and sort of, pulling out because he was injured. Alistair Brownlee, 2 days before St. George, pulling out, then pulling out of sub 7, then pulling out of Kona. And I also think about things like Lionel Sanders in Kona. Obviously incredible St. George race, but he was a guy that I was really excited to see what he did in Kona. Didn't even feature. Like, women, Danny Reif smashed St. George. It was incredible to see, but then didn't feature in Kona really. I find that there was a lot of that sort of stuff. And that's, if I look back at 2022, and I'm not trying to be negative, but that's probably the thing that I keep thinking about is there were so many, like we've spoken about this on this podcast for like years now, where we're like, oh my God, like 2020 originally.
I remember sitting in the back of my car in December 2019 going, 2020 is going to be the year. And I know what you're about to say, because I was going to echo it. You took the words out of my mouth. If you asked me for one defining emotion to sum up last year, it would be frustration. Simply because I just kept getting disappointed and frustrated with the fact that races I wanted to see and people I wanted to see racing weren't managing to make it to the start line. You mentioned Alistair Brownlee, you mentioned Jan Frodeno, you mentioned Daniela Reif not firing in Kona. It's just, you didn't get to see those head-to-heads where people were really competing, because more often than not, one of the favourites you wanted to see race wasn't racing that race for whatever reason. Do you think the injury, the fact we saw so many people out with injury, it's a culmination of, coming back from COVID and more races. But do you think because we had more championship races, that just highlighted to us as an audience how often these athletes are injured anyway? And it gave us an opportunity to see that, actually, if you're bringing all these athletes together as often as you are, you're going to see actually how often they are actually injured and taking a bit of time off and not at their best.
No, that's actually a very good point, isn't it? Because we're not used to seeing these stacked fields where it is a who's who. Whereas there were multiple times last year, and you're right. Again, I can't go past the fact that we didn't see Jan or Alistair or Javier Gomez. And I'm talking of sort of that, I don't want to call them the older generation, but they're not they're not racing short course anymore. Yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it. And it is interesting, like you say, that disappointment thing, because that's sort of how I look at it. There were so many things where I was like, fuck, this is going to be it. This is going to be epic. And then it doesn't. And it's not to say that it wasn't a great year, because I think it was a phenomenal year for the sport. I guess I just want to see, like, there's so many things that we could have seen last year that we didn't get to, and maybe we will not see now. Like, I can't help but think we're probably not going to see Jan Frodeno race Kona ever again. And what would have happened if he was there last year? I mean, I feel like that sub-7 race would have gone very differently if we had have seen a fit Alistair Brownlee there. Disagree with me if you like, but I
agree. I mean, Joe did such a good job at sub-7.
My performance of the year, to be honest.
Yeah,
mate.
absolutely, such a good job, and it was amazing seeing him there. But in a different part of the multiverse somewhere, Ali Brownlee did make that start line, and the race would have been different. It would have been scripted entirely differently because of his power on the swim. Alistair Brownlee did my head in last year, mate. Not for any fault of his own, but more for just like, Christ's sake, didn't make it to the start line at St. George, didn't get to sub-7, just stop fucking up.
That reminds me. So when I was in again Bahrain, I was with Christian. We did the swim practice the day before. So it's me and Christian walking to the swim start, and obviously, as much as you may believe it was because of me, people were coming up and asking for photos and stuff. It was obviously because of Christian. And so many people called me Alistair. I'm like, what the fuck? They think I'm Ali Brownlee. So I think Alistair Brownlee must be definitely. They must think he must be an extremely good looking man, because there was, like, I'm not even joking, probably 3 or 4 people were like, good luck tomorrow, Ali. I'm like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
No worries. I'm actually technically sorry. I'm good
or something. And annoyingly, when I was last time in Bahrain with you, it was you that people came up to us and asked for a picture of, because I had to fucking take it, didn't I?
I know, mate. It's at least maybe next time we're there, though, they'll think you're Christian. Like, you'll be with me. So I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't know. He's got a full head of hair, though, isn't he? I mean, I've probably got more of the Lionel Sanders about me.
No, I mean, look, we sort of just touched on it, but I think there was some really standout performances last year, and I think there were some performances that I look back on, and in the moment I thought were absolutely phenomenal, and then I've sort of, I guess, softened on a little bit. But I mean,
give me an example of one of those.
A race that I think in the moment I thought was absolutely incredible, and I look back now and I think it was Magnus's Roth win, for example. I still think it was an incredible performance, and when the points, there was all the controversy around why there were so many points. And at first I was like, no, look, there was, and I've said it a lot, he was literally seconds off Jan Frodeno's record, and he's second ever Ironman. Incredible. But I also then think if you look at the depth of the field and a lot of those things compared to some of the other events, like I think that Kona race and what Gustav did has really eclipsed a lot of, it's changed the context, I suppose, performances. I mean, even I hate to say it, Christian's performance in St. George, which I thought was absolutely phenomenal. But again, I look at it and I'm like, he just sort of did his thing. Hey, like, it wasn't really anything. Like, it was just Christian just doing Christian's thing. Like, much like both races in St. George, that 70.3 world title, he never even looked like at risk. And I don't want to just single out Magnus, because I think there were others. But I really feel like there was a lot of, in the moment, getting really excited about a thing, and then looking back, and I'm like, it was good, definitely, but I guess a year of excellent means that there's a bigger gap, I suppose.
I have this feeling at the moment that the sport has changed slightly, in the sense that several years ago you could hear of, I don't know, a really good cyclist or something coming over to triathlon, and you would think, oh, they're absolutely banging. They've probably done a bit of the sport when they were younger, and they might have a chance of winning it. When Lance Armstrong, for example, was coming across, he was obviously a triathlete in his younger years, and you'd think, there's a chance he might have a shot at Kona here. But now Richie Port's retired from the professional peloton, and the talk is that he might come over to triathlon. Times have changed so much now.
Yeah,
my brain's just like, you ain't got a fucking scoot. You ain't got a chance. He hasn't got a chance. He hasn't got a chance. He's too long in the tooth, and the specialism within triathlon now is to such an extent that even some of the big contenders that we know in this sport haven't got a chance, in my mind, because I think there is such an elite tier now that's being formed.
I think that's exactly the case. I feel like last year's really highlighted to me. I mean, there's such a gap, I think, and I've been quite vocal about the fact that I think there is this S tier of athlete and then there's the A tier, and I've copped a lot of hate for it, because I've said that there are certain athletes who I believe are never going to be able to be, in that top tier. And I think this year's, I mean, you're close to S tier, mate. You're S tier in my heart. But I feel like, last year's the way last year went has, I think, shown that, because I feel like we've spoken about disappointment, but I really feel like looking at the races and the fields last year, and with those injuries, that it feels a little shallow at the moment. The sport, like I look at some of the results, and I feel like, again, God, I'm starting to sound like one of those old guys like back in my day. But I feel like, you look at the 2019 World Championship field, and you look at the top 10 or the top 15 or whatever, like it made more sense to me. Whereas I look at this year's, and there's a lot of names in there where I was like, what the hell? Like, how? Wow. Like, okay, I didn't really expect that. And that's obviously because of the injuries, and people have retired and things have changed. It's been a few years.
The sport is going through a massive cycle of professionalization at the moment, in the sense that the depth of the athletes coming through, like, are lifetime triathletes who've gone through the WTS process, supported by their what's the word?
Federations.
Yeah, federations, sorry. And then, moved on to longer course, where they've just been triathletes for their entire lives. Now that top tier will start to expand as more join it and it come into it. And you're going to start to see some of the older athletes, but some of the more longer in the tooth, just sort of started triathlon a bit later, when it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was, a little bit easier to become a professional long course triathlete, because there wasn't that sort of process in place. And I think you're going to see that expanding. And as we go up through the gears now, you're going to start to see the performances increase. And I think it's going to be harder to step into the sport at a later age unless you've got some serious gifts.
Yep.
And then I don't know, like someone like Lionel Sanders, look, I've ebbed and flowed on that man for a long time. I've had some seriously good times watching some of his performances, because he has the ability to be absolutely remarkable sometimes, but also incredibly frustrating. I think his time has passed. I don't think he'll ever have that chance, or that not chance, but I just don't think he'll ever make it now, really, to what he wants to achieve, which is to win the Ironman World Championships. I can't see that happening. I think he had his moment, and I think that's gone. And I think we'll start to see more of the lifetime triathletes filling that top tier, and that top tier will just get bigger now. Slowly.
There's a few other things I find interesting, because let's sort of separate the men's and women's, not like Ironman World Championships, but I feel like if you look at the two, there's a bit of a difference happening in the moment, where I feel like the strength of men's racing seems to be the long stuff. I feel like Ironman racing in the men's is red hot right now, whereas I look at the middle distance and it's lacking. It's not that it's, again, I hate to sound like I'm being super negative, but I feel like there's just this, I don't know, there's not that thing that's grabbing me in middle distance. And again, I'm a huge middle distance fan. Like, it's my favorite distance. But then I look at the women's race, and I think it's maybe the opposite, where I think the women's middle distance racing is phenomenal right now. Like, they're the races that I want to watch when you look at those people that are absolutely doing battle. Then I look at the women's long course, and again, I'm not as enthralled by it. So I find that's also quite interesting, because, like, just look at what they're doing, and it's an interesting point for me, because, and there's something we'll talk about later, where I'm very curious to see what's sort of going on. That middle distance area, which we've both, I think lots of people have sort of thought is the future of the sport in a lot of ways, from a broadcast point of view, from a mass participation point of view. I feel like maybe things are starting to shift a little bit. I mean, maybe we can go into it now, but the news came out literally a couple of days ago that the PTO have now announced their Asian tour in Singapore in the 18th and 19th, or 19th and 20th of August, which is literally 1 week before 70.3 Worlds. And which I think is fantastic. Like, we've spoken a lot about, we think that PTO need to sort of stick it to Ironman. But I also look at 70.3 Worlds they've had the last few years, and it hasn't been, I feel like some of the sheen's gone off 70.3 Worlds. And, like, I mean, having it 3 weeks after Kona last year meant that it was just sort of an afterthought. And I don't know what it is about that distance at the moment, where I've sort of, again, I don't know whether it is Ironman or like, oh, well, the PTO is doing their thing, let them do it. We don't need to worry about that. We'll just focus on they don't have Ironman, we've got Ironman. But there is, I don't know, this is just me sort of, my mood, or whatever you want to call it.
What do you think has changed over that? Because you're right. I think 3-4 years ago, 70.3 was absolutely buzzing.
Yeah.
You know, everybody was all over it. And then now, do you think it's because we've seen a renewed focus on some of the sort of record breaking times over the iron distance, and we've seen the sort of the eye of the sport and some of the younger athletes coming through and really putting some incredible performances over the iron distance has made people go, oh, actually, I can focus on this and have a look at that, and it's taken away a little bit from the 70.3. Do you think that might be part of the reason?
Yeah, I definitely think that is part of the reason. I think we've got this. Like, I genuinely feel like we're in the most incredible period this sport's ever seen, where we're sitting there saying, "Oh, it's a bit weak, it's a bit soft." Where the reality is not. It's that we have a handful of athletes who are so fucking good at the moment
Yeah.
that they are making the sport seem shallow. And again, let's not. It's the Norwegian elephant in the room. We're looking at what Christian and Gustav have done to the sport in the last 3 years. Has literally. It's not just taking it to another. It's taking it to another fucking stratosphere, mate. In terms of
Yeah. I
performance,
mean, at
and
the
they've
risk of
made.
being Norwegian fanboys, it is that is the key to it right now, isn't it? It's the how do you beat them over the championship races, over the longer distance? How do you do that? How do you go about it? Who's going to crack that code? Because those that we see coming close are by no means close enough.
Exactly. And not just that, but I look at, because again, I would my thoughts are that the people who had the best chance of actually, doing what they do are their peers from short course racing, the Hayden Wilds, the Alex Yees, the Tyler Chucks, those guys. Hayden did not even come close to Christian at the Collins Cup last year. Like not even close. And then you look back to the Olympics, same thing. Like it was fucking nuts what he did to those guys, where he literally attacked so far out and just went away. And it's almost like the next couple of years, because we know they're focusing on Paris. And I mean, who knows? Christian is a special beast. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him at every fucking race again this year and he wins the whole thing. But if they're not at those big events this year, will there be a little asterisk next to it? Like kind of like you look at a champion like Patrick Langer, 2-time Ironman World Champion, and people almost forget him because he won the races when Frodo wasn't there. Yeah. And I wonder if that's an effect we're going to start to see where that...
I don't think there'll be an asterisk there because they're not... what am I trying to say here? Because they've got so many years left in them to come back and win the race. I think if they're focusing on something like Paris, which is an Olympic title, obviously, then that's what they're doing. And that's the reason they're not there. If they were aiming for Kona and then suddenly both got injured and couldn't race it, that's where I see something like an asterisk coming in. And it's just like, does that make sense? It's just a way of thinking about it in my own brain.
I definitely see what you're saying. I have this feeling. I know I've been in conversations with athletes and brands and things where it's been like, well, it's a great opportunity because the Norwegians are focusing on short distance next year. Like, I think that there already is this bit of this mindset in the sport where...
Yeah. Now, look, I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see Christian as just focusing. If I'm in my mind, I see them both racing Kona.
Well, like I said, Kona next year makes sense because it's post Paris, whereas the Nice race this year, I think it's too close to...
Sorry, I didn't mean Kona. I meant Nice. I'm only just about getting my head around the fact that Kona's not happening this year.
Yeah, like I don't know, but I don't want to just talk about the men's, because then I look at the women's race and I feel like a lot of stuff has happened in women's racing last year that some of it not so surprising, some of it incredibly surprising, and like again, it's a similar sort of thing where we're so focused on what those Norwegian guys are doing and how exceptional they are that we've sort of forgotten that I think a very similar thing is happening in women's triathlon at the moment, but maybe not to the same level. In women's triathlon, I feel like it's really happening in that middle distance racing, which is why I'm so excited by it, because there's many of them, but we have two athletes in particular, I think, who at that middle distance are so phenomenal, and that's Ashley Gentle and Taylor Knibb. Different skill set, but they are, to me, I guess the sort of female equivalent of the Norwegians in terms of how quickly they've raised that bar. Like what Taylor Knibb did at 70.3 Worlds and what Ashley Gentle did at that Dallas PTO event is like mind-boggling, mate. Like that Ash ran how many minutes into Taylor Knibb in that race, and then Taylor Knibb did what she rode 7 minutes or something into like Lucy Charles and that at 70.3. It again shows to me that there's this level above what we're used to seeing that then makes everything sort of retroactively look a little bit less shiny, I guess is a nice way of trying to put it. I don't know.
Do you think what we're going to see over the next few years, where we start to see performances increase and increase and increase, and we start to see the depth of the pro field on the men's and women's side grow with as the fast times become deeper and the gaps become less? So, the difference between first and 10th is going to be a lot less because there's going to be more of a... Do you think it's going to make us look back at the generations that we saw before and think, oh, that was kind of the evolution of the sport rather than the pinnacle?
I mean, probably not. Like, I mean, I love cricket, for example, and I look back at the 90s, the early 2000s, that period of cricket where I was a kid, and they're like fat blokes with moustaches and stuff who clearly aren't elite athletes. And
but
I don't look at it
as the best.
Yeah, but I don't look at it and go as any less legit. I think it's just that's how it was, and that's what it was. I don't think it'll necessarily tarnish.
No, I didn't mean delegitimize it. I sort of just mean put it into context.
Okay,
as its place in the history of the sport.
Yeah, no, I could see that. I mean, again, so much about this sport changes so quickly because of things like the technology and the advancements. And I mean, we had how many goddamn discussions about the shoes that Gustav wore, or changes to bikes and what happened at sub 7 and things like that. I think that the time thing is, as much as I love the times, I guess when it looks at the pro racing, at least as a point of reference, I think it is becoming a little less irrelevant just because things are changing so rapidly, and it can't purely be about human performance. And if it is, fucking hell, like it's ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know, mate. I don't know.
So let's talk about Nice. What do you think about Nice now that's been announced?
Yeah, I love it. Again, I mean, I think we said this last year, but I'll say it a bit again. I really wish they didn't separate the men's and women's race. I think that is a bad decision. But I think putting Nice as a World Championship Ironman is an excellent decision. And I had a really long conversation with somebody about this. Who was it I was talking to? It was it was an industry professional. We were talking about this the other day. And like you look on any of the comment, whenever I think when the post that Ironman announced, when Jan put out things like, oh fuck, and this sort of stuff. There's a lot of negativity, and the positive comments are few and far between. And I feel like the people who are saying this is a disgrace, I can completely understand where they come from. If you have dreamt of Kona, you've been in the sport for a while, you've dreamt of racing Kona, the thought of it not being there anymore must be upsetting. It's not going away though. You can still race Kona, and I feel like if a sport and not just triathlon, but any sport was to base their decision-making or limit their decision-making for potential future growth and future change and stuff based on what fans who don't like change want, not a lot in this world would change. And I feel like we're very focused on the negativity here, but I feel like that is going to be triathlon has a pretty high churn rate, mate. Like there's not a lot of people who stay in the sport for, more than 5 years really. So in 5 years' time, when we are, much older than we are now, and I still have more hair than you, I don't think it will be such a big thing anymore. They'll be like, I feel like because we're in this thing at the moment, and it is such a difficult thing for people to understand, there is this overwhelming feeling of negativity towards it. But I bet there was, I can't remember, I wasn't around, but what do you think the reaction was when they wanted to move the World Championships from Honolulu to Kona in the first place? I reckon, obviously the sport was a lot smaller, but there would have been people who didn't like that.
Probably. There probably were. It was less of a social media age, wasn't it? So less of that instant, rabid kind of, pile on. But yeah, I think you would. We're getting a lot of the comments you hear from the women professionals is that they are very pleased that they're not racing on the same day as the men because they get more coverage and the audience gets to see their performances from start to finish, which I think is a very valid and fantastic thing. Yeah. I'm super keen on Nice. Yeah, I love it. Too. I love that part of the world. I love Nice as a place. I think the cycling around there is fantastic. I think it's a hell of a race, and I think it will do the Ironman World Championships proud I think it would just take a bit of time for certain people to get used to it.
But
But also,
yep.
those people that are, sorry to interrupt you again, but like, they'll keep moaning, but the sport will carry on and people
Yeah,
will
exactly.
enjoy it. And soon enough, they'll be like, just an old man shouting at clouds.
Well, we saw this with St George when St George was announced as the replacement World Championships. I feel like it was the same thing. There was the outrage. I was like, you're ruining the history of the sport. Oh my God, Kona is the heart and soul of triathlon. It's the origin. No, it's not. It was the other island. But then it happened and people were like, oh, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
On with it. Like,
yeah. Exactly. That's what I mean. That's kind of what I mean. It's like, they go, oh, actually, that was all right. And it's like their level of acceptance goes nowhere near to meet the level of vitriol in the build-up.
Yeah. No, again,
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, but this I see this all the time in the sport. I mean, I'm guilty of this myself because same thing, sub 7, sub 8 last year. There was a lot of like, it's not real triathlon, it's drafting. Oh my God, it's the work. You're ruining the spirit of triathlon. Happens, I was pretty good. And even like the couples championship last year, like, and I definitely don't think it was pretty good, but I remember being like, this is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, why is this
Hang
thing?
on.
And then it happened and I forgot about it. And I'm like,
yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't affect your life because if you don't like it, don't watch it. I didn't watch it because it is the stupidest thing that's ever happened in the world. But
yep,
I will wind my neck in and just say I didn't watch it and I didn't, and I moved on with my life. I didn't let it wind me up. I didn't lose any sleep.
The other thing about the change that I touched on last year when it came out, and I was saying that I think you're going to see a bigger opportunity for a lot of other brands to maybe shine because of the cost associated with Kona. And I've since spoken to several brands, one of whom I won't name them, who literally referenced what I said on the podcast and said, you're exactly right. Like they've said, we can't afford to go to Kona because it would literally cost us almost our entire marketing budget. But we can go to Nice. It's a lower barrier of entry. And as I said, for working on the business side of triathlon, I have so many thoughts about that. I've seen so many things happening lately in the sponsorship realm that really concerns me because it feels like there is a few bigger brands that have this really tight grip, and then the rest are like pleading this. Oh, it's really hard for us. We don't have the money, offering these ridiculous, sponsorship deals, and then you hear about some top tier pro athletes accepting product only deals because it's a very weird time in the sport. And I think that if we have a race like Nice where we're suddenly going to see, instead of it just being Hoka and Canyon and Ventum or whatever, those 3 or 4 brands that we see, Kona they should actually. I would love Hoka to find out how much it would cost for the week of the race to rename the island Hoka because it's 4 letters. It's like a bit of an anagram or something, but it means that more brands are going to be able to be present at Nice, which means they're going to have more activations, which means more age group athletes who are the ones that they're trying to sell to will probably be exposed to a brand, which means they might buy a brand at the expo, which means that brand might grow, get more revenue, which means they're going to be more competitive, which means that there's going to be more money to be able to go back into the pro area of the racing. And that's something that I keep thinking is really, really important because while the sport is very much almost a monopoly with what power IronMan has as a brand over it, we are starting to see a bit of that. Definitely not to the same extent, but there are certain brands in triathlon, and it seems to happen every year where one brand becomes the bike brand, and that one shoe company becomes the shoe company, and one wetsuit becomes the wetsuit company. And it rotates. Like, a few years ago, Specialized. It was all about Specialized. Then it was all about Cervelo. And I think it's starting to go all about Canyon and maybe Giant after what Christian and that have done. But yeah, if we have races that are easier for, all those European brands will be able to literally just pack their truck, drive down there, not have to fucking work out the flights and the bullshit and everything with Kona. It's, for me as an agent or, I work in the commercial part of the business, it's exciting for me because I see it as a the possibilities as a result of this are very exciting.
And it's not just that side of it either, because from the business's point of view, it's easier and cheaper and more accessible. You're also going to have access to many, many more fans, and people that wouldn't be able to afford to and never will go to Kona might be able to drive to Nice, or fly to Nice or to get the train to Nice because it's bloody cheap to travel in Europe. So it's just you're going to have more of an audience there as well. I'm going to be there. I'll drive down.
Yeah. I booked my accommodation. I mean, I knew it was confirmed. I knew it was confirmed well before they announced it, and because I knew that they sent Joe down for the press conference, so I knew it was happening. And I'd booked my accommodation, but again, I've got accommodation booked that's like walking distance to the start area of this race, and it is, I'm not even exaggerating, it's a fifth of what I paid in Kona. And it's yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be great. And again, as I've said before, if it doesn't work, okay, they'll go, oh, whoops, we made a mistake, and they'll probably just go back to this. But yeah, I've spoken about this ad nauseum, I feel like, but it's happening. We'll see. I just wish, like, let's just give it a chance, because we can keep complaining and banging on and seeing people, whatever. Let's see what happens. Again, bring the women and men back together, please. Let's bring the women's pro race to Nice.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think racing on different days is in my mind a good thing. If you can rotate the Thursday and the Saturday between the men, so you don't have any kind of anybody being relegated to what is considered the lesser day of the Thursday constantly. You just rotate. I think that's a good thing for, in terms of the women getting as much coverage as the men. The men's race not cutting into the women's race. The women, their performances being start from finish by the fans, same as the men's, so that you can really dial in on both of them. I just think racing in different places is fucking stupid.
It's an odd choice, but look, we touched on it a little bit earlier. Let's go back to it, and that is the PTO announcements of that Singapore Asian Championship in August. Because there's a bunch of stuff on that I'd like to unpack that we sort of loosely breezed over, but we didn't sort of buckle down on. Now, the first time we actually met was in Singapore around the Super League event, and we spent a few days in Singapore together. Singapore is one of my favorite cities on the planet, and if this race is because I think they've said it's in the Marina Bay Sands Financial District, which is like the main part of the around that, the bay and everything. If they nail this race, I think it's going to be like every criticism I've had of PTO putting on races in like shit locations that aren't really inspiring and things like that. That will 100% go out the window, because I think Singapore is such a good spot for one of these triathlons. It'll be hot. It'll be hard. It could be really exciting viewing. What do you think about this race, mate?
Work. In like you say, in that the first thing you think about is that big bloody hotel with the ship on top of it, isn't it?
Marina Bay Sands.
For that, yeah, exactly. For that area, and if they get the location right. Hang on a second, my emails are just telling me I'm just going to close this down because they've decided to disconnect everything. If they get the location right, and they get the broadcast right, and they get the content right, and they get the camera work right, they've got a real opportunity to have a very, very shiny broadcastable event that looks quite striking. Remember that first PTO event that we watched? And it looked like after they'd come out of the swim, they were running into an industrial estate where most of the barriers weren't even branded properly, and the space was too big for the amount of competitors that were there. It just looked very badly contrived and created. Whereas an opportunity here to really create something that is very shiny. Will they do it? I don't know, because I mean we've talked about it earlier last year that we saw a drop in quality at the Collins Cup this year, as opposed to an increase in quality. So they've recently announced their partnership with Warner Brothers, is it?
Yeah, Discovery, yeah.
Discovery. So, looks like all things are heading in the right direction. So I hope so, mate. I hope they fucking nail it, because it would be a cool place in the world to have a race. They've put it in a position where it's a week before the Ironman 70.3 World Championship, so they're going into battle with Ironman for some of those pros and who's going to come and race it and who's going to go and race the Ironman race. Money will talk, but also there are a lot of athletes that will see the PTO race and think, some people are going to race that. I'll race the Ironman things. I might have a bit more of a chance.
There's so much around this date that I want to talk about. And firstly, I fucking love it. Like, I love that this, and again, Sam, you can disagree. You can say it's not the case, whatever you like. I choose to interpret this as a big, let's fuck your move, Ironman. Like, they saw that 70.3 World Championship last year, and they thought what I thought. Oh, it seems like the sheen's gone a little bit. They've smelt blood in the water, mate, and they've made their move, because this, a week before, world champs in Finland, not a country known for its hot weather. Singapore, week before, very hot weather. Like, I really think we're going to see athletes. Some athletes are going to probably try to do both. I don't think they're going to do very well because racing in the heat is hitting, like it drains you. But I'm very, very, very curious to see who picks what. And the third point that it was Jordan Blanco, who's actually one of the judges at the Global Triathlon Awards, which are happening tonight, I think. Will McCloy, one of the hosts, Will, I hope you crush it, mate. But she made the point that it's also on the same weekend as the Paris test event. And that was something that I found I hadn't even thought of, which was really interesting to me because the athletes who I want to see race these PTO events are the short course athletes. I love to see those short course guys step up. And I was talking with Joe about this week, and I said, I think if anything, it shows that the PTO go, no, we are a long course organization. Like, here we are, we're committed. We're not, fuck the short course guys. We're not worried about their race schedule. This is what we're doing. Who do you think is going to pick 70.3 worlds, and who do you think would pick the PTO event? Like, which would you pick if you were one of the best athletes in the world?
Do we know the prize purse for the PTO race?
I would assume it's the same as the other ones. I've not heard, but I would assume it's the same. It's the big payday. So
then, what would I pick? What sort of athlete would I be? Hey, where would I'd be a 70.3 specialist, wouldn't I? I'd be like the all rounder. I'd be the Flintoff of the triathlon world. Slightly chunky. But,
our Americans are going, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I get it, mate, and I appreciate it. I met him.
Yeah, I think, the old campaigner that I would be, I'd probably go and throw my hat into the PTO ring and see what I could get out of it. I think would be where I would be, because it'd be a bigger payday. I would have my career. I've had my career, mate. I've probably won the 70.3 worlds 4 or 5 times. I'm an IronMan world champion.
You're very Sebastian Kienle-esque to me, actually. I think you're a Sebastian Kienle-esque athlete to me. That's the sort of category that I'd put you
very
in.
Similar, very similar.
Whereas I'm much more Jan Frodeno-esque, so...
Yeah.
Because I think I've had this discussion on Twitter a little bit, but I feel like you're probably going to see, because brands still care about the world titles. Bonuses around performances are always higher for world championships. The 2 biggest bonus races are always Ironman World Championships, 70.3 World Championships, which means that I think that, you look at the prize money the PTO offers, which is great, but there's still not prestige around those events, which means that the brands, like to get those PTO events included in athlete bonuses is not as hard, but it was pretty hard for the last year. So I think if you look at a pure prize money point of view, makes sense. Go to the PTO event, fuck 70.3 worlds. But it's not. Like, there's a lot more. If you win that 70.3 race or do quite well at a 70.3 World Championship race, there's a lot more potential benefits that come with it as well. Increased sponsorship, more bonuses, things like that. So I think what we're probably going to see is, if you're like a genuine contender at a 70.3 world title, like you and I mean not even top 10, like top 5, we can pick them on one hand. They'll probably go do 70.3 worlds. And I feel like what we'll probably see at the PTO event is that lower tier, the 5 to 20s, who aren't so sure, or maybe aren't so good at the short. Like, again, an athlete like Joe Skipper, for example. Joe's fucking incredible athlete, but he's not got that 70.3 sharpness. But he could go to a race like the Singapore race because he's still fucking good. Might not win it, might win it, but it's not going to be the same sort of race as a 70.3 as well. I probably wouldn't pick Joe for the win. So I think that's what we're going to see. And again, which I find curious, because as much as it is a bit of like PTO going, fuck you, you would hope that the athletes who would then, they own the series, would support it. But I don't think we're at a point yet where we're going to see that, because...
No, I think you're right. I think you'll see the 70.3 specialists, the people that, like you say, have got a real shot at the 70.3 world title, will probably see that world title as having more value to them and their sponsors and their career, but also weigh that against the... I know, Sam, I know it's going to work, but like the uncertainty as to whether the PTO events are even going to exist in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. We don't know whether it's a successful thing yet, or whether it's going to keep going, and whether that PTO title is going to mean anything on your palmares in 5 years' time, whether it was just a flash in the pan. So if you're a specialist 70.3 racer and you've got a real shot at that championship, go and get your championship. Like you say, I think we're going to see the kind of thing that happened in Samarin, where you had the Collins Cup on one day and then the championship the next.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see that kind of distribution of athlete where you've got those that can really compete in the Collins Cup as an event as it is, and in that one, and then the people that are sort of not in that event having a really good race the day after, but in this case a week after. But it'll be a slightly different kind of race. It'll be a different dynamic.
Yeah, no, you make a good point about the uncertainty around the PTO. This is, again, this chicken egg situation, though, isn't it? Because in order for this to become sustainable, we do need the best athletes there to, like, this is the foil in it. Because if this was just another event company who's offering the big prize money, I think it'd be a lot clearer. As I said, the best athletes are probably going to get a 70.3 worlds. The slightly, not that top echelon will go to the PTO event. But it is because of the ownership. Like, it isn't, and I actually don't know whether the athletes are going to think about it this way, but it's in their best interests to make this series work because, again, then there's more big prize money races, but it's their series. Like, this is what I mean. The athletes own it.
But if the PTO as a collective has decided to do this as a fuck you to Ironman the week before the 70.3, that in reality, the athletes want to take the power away from Ironman a little bit. Like you say, that has monopolized the series almost to a point where they can screw people down. They're not paying as much. They're not paying as adherence fees as much. They're not paying prize money as much. The prize money doesn't go deep. You can barely cover your travel costs if you're lucky. You would think the athletes as a collective would want to do a collective fuck you to Ironman and just be like, you know what? We're all going to race the PTO event.
Ain't going to happen though, is it? Like,
no, that's the problem.
You sit here saying it and you know that that's not going to be the case.
Exactly, because you'd have to sacrifice almost a generation of athletes to do that, because you would, I don't know, it would be like you'd have a few years where those that should be winning the Ironman World Championships at 70.3s wouldn't be. Other people would be, because people would still go
and win.
And it would be the third, fourth tier pros, and you'd have it would be a strange few years while that battle was fought. And I'm not sure triathlon has got the longevity of career or the prize money to allow those professional athletes to be comfortable enough to sacrifice that.
Is this then the similar problem that I was talking about though with the change of Nice, and you got this current generation who are complaining, but we know that in 5 years they're not going to be that. Like, is it a similar sort of thing where you're right that there is going to be this generation of athletes that are at this weird crossroads, but in 10 years' time we're not going to be worrying about it so much anymore because there's going to be the new generation and the PTO series is the series, and like
I don't know which way it's going to go. I think Ironman has got some changes to make. I really do.
Do they make them though? Do you think
they
make them?
They will. No, I don't see it because I don't think. I'm putting words in their mouth, but I'm putting words in their mouth based on evidence that I've seen, through my eyes and ears. I don't think they particularly care about the professionals. They care about the fact that they've got a very good business model making money off the amateur athletes.
Yeah.
And that will always be there because it is, to be an Ironman is such a weighty thing in the sport when it comes to the eyes of the age groupers.
Yep.
Now, I think if the professionals fizzle out on the Ironman side, I don't think it will particularly bother them. I don't know. It's hard to get into the heads of the people that run Ironman, but I don't see it as a fight that they are particularly looking to fight that hard.
But you say that, but I also look at things that have happened the last year where their broadcast has increased in quality a lot. Their commentary is awful. Yeah. But like they've upped their quality of their broadcast. So I feel like that and I mean they've gone into I see it and I get it, but I also go like I wonder if maybe on some level they do care. But I feel like pro Ironman racing, and I mean purely 70.3 and Ironman branded events, it almost feels like the pro athletes are always just fighting over scraps. It's like, okay, well, we'll give them this. This is what they'll get. We don't pay for their accommodation. We don't pay appearance fees. We are the sun around which you rotate. Like we are, at some point there has to be a break. We're fucking sick of this. Like, we're sick of this.
That's kind of what I meant a minute ago. As a united front. But you say the broadcast has improved. Yeah, brilliant. The broadcast has improved. The commentary is is only rubbish because it's an unbroadcastable distance. It's an unbroadcastable event. It's an impossible event to commentate on. It's not like Test cricket, where you can watch the tension build and you see the momentum ebbing and flowing throughout a test, and you build up to those crunch points, and you have moments where you're not paying attention. It doesn't matter. It's not like that. It's a linear thing, and I think the Ironman distance is doomed to failure at a broadcast level, especially as times change in the world we live in now, with social media and attention spans, and everything's getting shorter and quicker, and little bit of feeding you little bits of happiness on the internet, that I just don't think an Ironman event can satisfy.
It's interesting you say that, though, because I tend to agree with you. But if I again look, we were retroactively looking at the year last year, I still think the most exciting races I saw last year and watched were Ironman races. Like, if I had to go back and pick 3 events to rewatch from last year, I think they'd all be Ironman distance races, to be honest. I don't think they would be the middle or shorter distance race, which again I find
because you're looking at it from an aficionado of the sports perspective.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're not the average Joe on the street whose attention you're trying to grab.
Oh, thanks, mate. That almost sounds like a compliment.
Well, being called an aficionado is, that you'll dine out on that one. But you're right. If you ask me whether there's one event, I could pick one event I could go and relive or rewatch from last year. It would be sub 7, sub 8. Because it just blew my mind in so many different ways. Specifically, the bike element with the trains and the teams working together. I was in heaven watching that. But that's coming from someone who's an absolute geek for that sort of shit.
Yeah. I know. I still can't. I will never forget that. And it's on the Phoenix Instagram account. I was out on my bike TT and holding. I've got this little camera. And I was going about 50k an hour, and I remember Christian's group came past. The noise that these guys made, you could hear them come in, and I'm like, what's happening? The noise they made going past me, like I was standing fucking still at 50k an hour, is still one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Like, I remember just being like, what the fuck is this? This is ridiculous. But I think the that race and then Kona, both men's and women's races, are phenomenal. Mate, I know we're getting close to the end of the episode, and we sort of did a bit of a retrospective on last year. I want to finish up by asking you just a couple of quick things about last year. I want your athlete of the year, both men and women, and then what you think was the best performance of the year last year. How's that sound?
Okay.
Put you on the spot a little bit.
Best performance? Do you want? What do you want? All right. Best
Whatever
male.
You think.
Best male athlete of the year. I am going to go with Christian. Fucking Gustavin.
Interesting,
because of his performance in Kona. I loved it. I just thought it was like watching the distillation of the perfect athlete doing that race at that point. I loved seeing him do that. My women's athlete of the year is Chelsea Sodaro.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because of what she just unexpectedly pulled out at the Kona race. And and who she is, and her life up to that point, and the fact that she'd gone away and had a child and come back, and I just think it's something that the world needs to see, because we need to put more emphasis on the fact that with the right support networks in place, people can do that, and it shouldn't be the exception; it should be the rule. From performance of the year, mate. Oh, it's got to be Joe Skipper at sub 7. The man brought emotions out of me that day. He brought emotions out of me, and it's not often I can say that about anything really. He really watching that go down was spectacular, and only because Christian beat him. Fair play he did, but not by much. And with a week's notice, Joe turned up and he opened the taps. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody open the taps quite like that before.
No, I like. There's not even a doubt in my mind that Joe's sub 7 was my performance of the year. I still just talk. And the thing is, you talk to him about it, and he's still to this day so like nonchalant about the whole thing. Like I've said, I don't think Joe appreciates just how incredible. No. In the context of everything that performance was. Like, he gets it sometimes. I think it was after the race where we were walking to dinner, and I was like, dude, you're fucking Rocky Balboa. He's like,
Yeah.
really? I'm like, yeah, mate. Like, literally, this is the
This
story.
is Rocky
of,
1.
This is
Rocky
Rocky
2
1.
needs to come now. I remember when he
My mouth-
was on his last or second to last lap, and I was running alongside trying to keep up, and I shouted, "You're on for the sub 7, Joe. You're going to do it." And he looked at me and he was like, "Am I?" Because he thought,
Yeah.
because Christian was ahead of him, he thought it was game over. He thought he was going to come
Yeah.
trailing in. It was good. It was good. Go on, your turn.
Yeah, so that's my performance of the year in both either men's or women's. If I had to pick a female performance of the year, it would be Chelsea and Kona. To this day, I still never would have picked her. Never would have picked her for that win, and it was so impressive to see just everything about that performance: the control, the self confidence, the ability to slow down at the aid stations to do what she needed to do, not try to go off the front and smash everybody on the bike. Like it was just a very for a first time winner in Kona, it was not a first time winner in Kona's performance to me. It was a veteran, expert, master craftsman performance, and I think that's extremely exciting for what's going to come. I think Chelsea is going to be very fascinating to watch in the next few years. So she's my female performance.
So
of
you
the year.
match me with those ones. I'm intrigued by your men's one. Is it going to be Gustav?
No, Christian's my male athlete of the year. I think again, Gustav was amazing, but Gustav didn't race as much as Christian. He missed a few events, like his 70.3 worlds. I mean, I get it. I was so not surprised to see him withdraw. We saw him withdraw from St. George, which was very upsetting. Incredible performance in Kona. One of the best races we've ever seen. And then he did a couple of PTO events, and that was sort of it. Like it felt like it was a bit of a not a softer year, just not the same year that Christian. Whereas you look at Christian, one St. George, one sub 7, 170.3 worlds. Then podiumed, came second at the Bergen World Cup event, and then had 2 top 10 finishes in World Triathlon Series events. Like he covered the spectrum last year, man. Like it to me was. I've always said that the reason I think Jan Frodeno is the greatest of all time is because he's won everything, every distance he's won it. Christian did that in 1 year. Like I think we saw possibly if he won Kona, there's no doubt in my mind it would have been the greatest season in triathlon history, and I don't think we probably see it happen again. The only thing is going to be is if next year with Paris and then a world title, that would be incredible. Again, the thing we spoke about in 2021. My female triathlete of the year, it probably isn't going to be Chelsea Sodaro. I think, again, absolutely amazing, but it's Ashley Gentle for me, mate. I just think that Ash Gentle came out and dominated, mate. Like,
yeah, and you
absolutely,
to be fair, you called it before she did as well, which irritates me somewhat.
She is, again, she makes me. It's like so exciting as an Australian to have an athlete of her caliber doing what she's doing at the moment, and like I think she was. I still don't understand why she chose Noosa Try over 70.3 World Championships, and it will be interesting to see what an athlete like Ashley Gentle does with this Singapore race, because at least to me, it doesn't seem like she's that fussed about the world title. She's more after the big paydays. But she was my female triathlete of the year last year. She was phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. And it was a good year, mate. I think it was a phenomenal year. And we are back this year. It's going to be interesting. Like I said, there literally are these things coming up. So we'll see what happens. We will communicate them as much as we can. But until then, we're just going to continue like it's business as usual. James Bale, if people want to find out things about MX Endurance, where do they need to go?
Shit. I don't know.
Oh, you don't remember off the top? If you want to find out more about MX Endurance, head to mxendurance.com.
Or search MX Endurance on Facebook or at MX Endurance on Twitter or Instagram. If you want to follow me, I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram, or you can follow Tim at T414 on Instagram. Jump onto iTunes, give the show a review. You can do it in the podcast app, and it really helps the show out, and it's super easy. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend, help us grow the podcast. If you have any suggestions, questions, queries, or comments, send an email to podcast@mxendurance.com.
I actually don't think that email works anymore, to be honest. So probably don't.
Don't
send an
email that. No.
Send it on social media. That's the best way.
Yeah, there you go. Find Tim.
Cool.
Send Tim a message on Instagram. He loves it.
Jimbo, I'm glad we're back. I'm glad we're back to 2023. Big year, lots to come, lots of exciting things happening. I'm excited for it.
Here we go.
Are we going to see you on a triathlon race course this year? Do you reckon you're going to?
No, I don't think so. I think you're going to see me doing a few ultra marathons. That's going to be my my plan for the year.
UTMB?
I'm quite a way off qualifying for that, mate. No, I don't really have that ambition. I just want to get out and spend some time in nature and and refocus and
it's not going to help your hair grow back, mate. Like it's.
Yeah, I know, but wigs are getting more sophisticated nowadays, mate. If I want to go down the hippie route, I could do the Wayne Rooney as well, couldn't I, and have the implants.
Oh, it's no good, is it? Absolutely not. James, a pleasure, mate. Talk to you later.
Cheerio.